In an unprecedented move, the U.S. gave China a 3-day deadline to close its consulate general in Houston, Texas. China strongly condemns the behavior, urging the U.S. to reverse its decision or face countermeasures. Could China make the U.S. close its Wuhan consulate general in response? Will Trump's legacy be a new Cold War with China? And vaccine candidates in China, the U.S. and Europe are showing promise. How will these vaccines be rolled out in practice? Welcome to The Point. Coming to you from Beijing, I'm Wang Guan, sitting in for Liu Xin. As far as we remember, this is the first time ever that U.S. or China has forced the other side to close down its embassy or consulate since the two sides established diplomatic relations 40 years ago. The U.S. claims it did so to protect American intellectual property and personal information. The U.S. consulate in Wuhan has now been touted as likely to be closed in response. Where is this tit-for-tat stop? To make sense of it all, we have with us today Ding YIFAN, Senior Fellow at the State Council's Development Research Center, and Mike BASTIN, Senior Lecturer from the University of Southampton. And in Beijing, EINAR TANGEN, Current Affairs Commentator. Welcome to all of you, gentlemen. Washington issued a 72-hour, basically, ultimatum for Chinese consulate general in Houston to close and its diplomats and their families to leave. I mean, this is in effect expulsion of Chinese diplomats from the U.S. soil. Do you agree? Einar, why don't I start with you?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a backstory here that is circulating that what happened is that there were just under 1,000 U.S. Diplomats and family members who left Beijing during the Wuhan crisis. They then are now saying that they want to come back, but they do not want to be subject to COVID-19 tests, nor do they want to spend 14 days in quarantine. So they have said that that should be covered by the diplomatic immunity. Obviously, China does not agree. Every other consulate that I've contacted has said that they follow China's precautions, including tests and isolation. So in response to this, this is why this sudden notice went through. U.S. State Department decided to try to make this an issue, but instead of being truthful about why it was doing this, it then tried to connect this action to these two accused Chinese hackers that they say that they are indicting.
Well, Mr. Ding, how do you look at this episode? I mean, this is unprecedented, right? For the first time in their diplomatic history, Washington expelled or is about to expel Chinese diplomats.
Anyway, it's a brutal decision, a brutal action from the U.S. foreign policy responsible. So I mean the State Department, because once you get your diplomacy normally functioning, you have to get your partners informed quite a long time ahead. And without any reasoning, without any correct accusation, you brutally request your partner to leave your country. That's something unseen, even in the Cold War period with the Soviet Union. So I just wonder whether the Trump administration wanted to make some huge story before the election. I just wonder whether those kind of reasonable decisions were made upon some untold stories, untold reasons, especially as we are approaching today this year's election time, and then the public opinion polls showed that President Trump's rival had some points before him. So that could be a reason that pushed him to make some unreasonable decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mike BASTIN, how do you look at this?
I think I'm broadly in agreement with your previous panelist. I think it probably all boils down to Trump hitting the panic button. He realizes that Joe Biden has widespread popularity. he feels there is a genuine lead that his opponent has. November's not very far away. And sadly, he'll stop at nothing to create some sort of political scenario from which he thinks he'll benefit by looking tough and putting America first. But as you say, it's unprecedented. To say it's ham-fisted is a massive understatement. And this is very, very much hopefully going to backfire on Trump and lead to even more a greater lead for Biden and the end of this monster president.
Well, gentlemen, I want to play you what the U.S. State Department has said about why they are expelling Chinese diplomats. Let's take a look. Now, a spokesperson from the U.S. Department of State said that we have directed the closure of PRC, General Consulate in Houston, in order to protect American intellectual property and Americans' private information. EINAR, do they sound like credible reasons?
No, it's clearly not credible. I mean, as I said, they're trying to somehow connect this to intellectual property, and it has nothing to do with that. I agree with my other colleagues. This is simply Donald Trump pushing the panic button. But, you know, the unfortunate part of this is not one incident. Every single day there is a new accusation, new action against China. And what I fear is that he's trying to push not a war, but some sort of confrontation, where he can then say, if you're not with me, you're for China, and you're not a patriot. And this is very much along the line that he's been preaching in the U.S. in his campaign rallies. And this is, I think, how he's staking the rest of his presidency.
Well, EINAR, I mean, what's your best guess on how this decision came about? Was it okayed by President Trump himself at all, or was it driven largely by Pompeo, the Secretary of State?
There's no way that this was not authorized by Donald Trump. It was probably driven and suggested by Pompeo, kind of his tit-for-tat reaction, trying to figure out how he can go against China. I mean, right now he's on a European tour, stopping by England, bad-mouthing China, praising them for their actions against Huawei, which are completely, you know, as they said before, Huawei was fine, and then politically it's not fine. He's going against Nord Stream, which is a help to EU, and then he will be going to India, once again preaching anti-China venom and vernacular. So in his particular mind, the only issue is China. You have to keep bashing on China to take away attention from President Trump's domestic political ills.
Yeah, reminding me of what happened 4 years ago when Bannon was the chief strategist for President Trump, who suggested to Trump that in order to win, you will have to bash China on a unprecedented scale. Mr. Ding, let me go to you. Does this decision taken by Washington to expel Chinese diplomats, hundreds of them, have any legal basis? I mean, there's such a thing as Vienna Convention on Consular Relations and also Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations that says, you know, a guest country's interests, their diplomatic staff, must be protected by the host country. I mean, is Washington's move to expel Chinese diplomats without a prior notice, or at least not that we know of, in line even with its own U.S. domestic constitution?
It's totally against the International Convention on the Protection of Diplomats in another country. But the odd is that they couldn't find any reasonable pretext. So they find out the pretext of intellectual property infringement. But you know, when you told some intellectual property or some license, industrial license to a Chinese diplomat, do you think that a Chinese diplomat could understand anything about industrial license? It's completely a joke. Even you accuse an American diplomat in China, you say you steal some intellectual property from Huawei. I don't believe, because reasonably, a diplomat is not gifted enough to know so many things about intellectual property, or to know something with an industrial license. So it's completely groundless to expel Chinese diplomats on the pretext of such unreasonable arguments.
Yeah, I mean, people might understand why if there was such a move that targets one or two individuals, because there is such a thing in international law called persona non grata, person not appreciated. But I mean, you're targeting hundreds of, diplomatic staff in a consulate general. Now hold on for a second, gentlemen. I want to play you what the Chinese Foreign Ministry has said about all this.
On July the 21st, the U.S. abruptly asked China to close its consulate in Houston. This is American political provocation against China and a serious breach of international law and the basic norms of international relations. It is also a grave violation of a bilateral consular agreement and deliberately undermines China-U.S. relations. China strongly condemns this outrageous and unjustified move. We urge the U.S. to reverse this incorrect decision immediately. Otherwise, China will definitely take necessary legitimate actions.
Well, Mike in London, let me go to you. Reuters reported that China is considering closing U.S. consulate in Wuhan. Some Chinese citizens online are calling for a closure of U.S. consulate general in Hong Kong. Are we heading for a diplomatic war from your vantage point? I mean, between China and the U.S., obviously.
Well, this is such a provocative level that you would, it will be understandable for the Chinese to respond in a similar manner, or something that really does make it very, very clear that this is unacceptable. Hopefully there's not going to be some real internecine warfare developing, and I think there's a real call on the British government, the European powers to step in here and perhaps isolate Trump and America more with some very condemning language, public language that really does make it very clear that the Americans have behaved unacceptably. So I think that the issue now is not so much what the Chinese do or don't do, it's what the Europeans and the British government do say or don't say, and pile pressure, diplomatic pressure on Trump.
Well, I mean, still, this is pretty, for lack of a better word, unprecedented, right, Mike? I remember the UK and Russia expelled journalists some 2 years ago. But this is the first time the US has done so vis-a-vis Chinese diplomats. Are there any legal basis at all, in your opinion?
Yes, I'm sure there is a legal basis, and I'm sure they have contravened international law and international conventions, so that's something to explore further. And again, perhaps the Chinese can work with others in order to do this. And also, the point is to highlight and request some more detail as to what exactly the Americans claim has been going on. I mean, the words they've used really are a call to the sort of patriotic American, perhaps the sort of less educated American she is easily swayed. So I think that we need to see more detail, and hopefully that will emerge soon. But yes, certainly a breach of international law, I'm sure, has taken place, and that really will leave Trump in a very, very difficult position.
Well, EINAR, you have been following U.S.-China relations for quite a while. Where do you think relations are headed from now?
Well, under Trump, they're going downward. But remember, 3 months from now, we could see a very, very different scenario. And I understand, I don't know that there's any law against a country declaring one of these areas, one of these consulates, asking him to get out. It does break convention, but not the letter of the law. Remember, this is all about countries trying to get along, and obviously the U.S. has broken that convention. But remember, the point is, we are talking about this. We are not talking about what's happening in the United States, the record number of deaths, the COVID record number of infections. So this is the whole point. This is not about logic. It's not about any long-term strategy. It is simply about changing the conversation away from Donald Trump's domestic issues.
Well, Mr. Ding, a final question to you. What's next? Should Beijing prepare for now a military confrontation, perhaps, or a military offensive by Washington in South China Sea or on the issue of Taiwan?
Anyway, I think that the Chinese military is prepared for this kind of, but not very plausible, but eventual decision from the United States. So I think that the better Chinese army is prepared for this kind of military confrontation, the less possible is such adventure that the U.S. administration could dare take, I think.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so very much. Ding YIFAN, Senior Fellow at the State Council's Research Development Center, and Mike BASTIN, Senior Lecturer at the University of Southampton, and EINAR TANGEN, current affairs commentator.